My name is Amara, and this is the story of how my family's dismissal of me became their biggest mistake. Growing up, it was always clear who the star of the family was: my older brother, Ethan. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. He attended an elite university, landed a prestigious job in finance, and was always the center of every family gathering. Conversations revolved around his achievements, his promotions, and his ambitious future. My mother beamed with pride whenever she spoke about him, recounting his successes to anyone who would listen. And then there was me. I had chosen a different path, one that my family neither understood nor respected. I had always been drawn to technology and business, fascinated by the way industries could be transformed by innovation. But to my family, sitting in front of a computer all day wasn't a career. It was a waste of time. My mother often sighed, shaking her head whenever she saw me working. "Why don't you get a real job, Amara?" she would say. "Your brother is out there making a name for himself, and you're just here." At first, her words hurt, but over time, I learned to let them slide. I knew what I was capable of, even if they refused to see it. The shift in our family dynamic began when my father fell ill. He had spent decades building a modest but successful hotel business, owning several boutique hotels across the city. Though he was never as wealthy as my brother, he took pride in his work and had built a loyal clientele over the years. But when his health deteriorated, someone needed to step in to manage the company. Ethan, of course, was the obvious choice in everyone's eyes. He had the degree, the business acumen, at least on paper, and the experience of working in finance. But when the time came for him to take charge, he was too preoccupied with his own career to bother. "I have too much on my plate already," he told my mother. "Besides, I'm in finance, not hospitality. I don't have time to manage a few small hotels." That's when I made a decision that would change everything. Without telling anyone, I started studying the business. I combed through financial reports, reviewed operations, and spoke with managers at each hotel. I quickly realized that while my father had built a solid foundation, the business was struggling to keep up with modern trends. Bookings were declining, competitors were outpacing us with better technology, and marketing was almost non-existent. I knew that if nothing changed, our father's legacy would crumble. So I took action. Using my background in technology and business, I developed an online booking system that streamlined reservations and improved customer service. I revamped the company's digital presence, introducing targeted marketing strategies and leveraging social media to attract a younger, more tech-savvy clientele. Within months, revenue began to rise. Our hotels, once overlooked, were now booking at full capacity. But my family had no idea. To them, I was still the girl wasting time at home. My mother continued to express her disappointment, sighing dramatically whenever she visited my apartment. "Another day of sitting in front of that computer," she would say, her voice laced with exasperation. "Your father worked so hard, and you're just letting life pass you by." Little did she know, that computer was the reason the family business was thriving. Then one day, my father called me into his study. His health had worsened significantly, and he rarely had the strength for long conversations. But on this day, he seemed determined to speak. "Amara," he said weakly, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before: pride. "I see what you've been doing. I know how much you've changed this business, and I want you to know, I trust you." I felt a lump form in my throat. This was the first time he had ever acknowledged my work, the first time anyone in my family had. "Thank you, Papa," I whispered, my heart swelling with emotion. He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "You remind me of myself when I started out, always thinking differently. Don't let anyone make you doubt your worth." Those words stayed with me. But what I didn't know at the time was that he had already made a decision that would shock the entire family. A few weeks later, my father passed away. The grief was overwhelming, but amidst the mourning, something else loomed in the background: the future of the company. Ethan assumed, as did my mother, that he would be inheriting the business. He barely paid attention during the funeral arrangements, already preoccupied with what he believed was his next step in life: taking over what our father had built. It wasn't until the will was read that reality struck him. I was named the sole heir and majority shareholder of the company. The room fell into stunned silence. My mother's face turned pale, and Ethan sat frozen, his jaw clenched tightly. I could see the disbelief in his eyes, the anger simmering beneath the surface. "This has to be a mistake," he finally said, his voice tight. "Dad wouldn't do this." But it wasn't a mistake. My father had seen my potential, had recognized the work I had done when no one else had. He had made sure the company was in the hands of the person who had already been running it, me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the underestimated one. But Ethan and my mother weren't going to accept this so easily. And as I would soon learn, their fight was just beginning. This was just the start of what would become a bitter war over control, one that would test my strength, resilience, and determination. The real battle was yet to come. The day after my father's funeral, Ethan wasted no time in asserting what he believed was his rightful place. He called for a family meeting in the grand dining room of my mother's house, a space where we had shared countless dinners, celebrations, and, in my case, many moments of silent exclusion. I arrived to find him already seated at the head of the table, dressed in his usual tailored suit, exuding confidence. My mother sat beside him, her expression somber, yet expectant. I knew exactly what this meeting was about before he even spoke. "I think it's time we discuss the future of the family business," Ethan announced, lacing his fingers together as he leaned forward. "Now that Dad is gone, it's my responsibility to take over. I'll ensure everything runs smoothly." I remained silent, letting him speak. I wanted to see how far he would take this fantasy before I shattered it. "Of course, Amara," he continued. "We'll find something suitable for you. Maybe an assistant position in one of the hotels. That way, you can contribute without being overwhelmed." I almost laughed at the condescension dripping from his voice. I knew he truly believed every word he was saying. To him and my mother, I had been nothing more than a burden, a bystander in our father's legacy. They had no idea that I had been the one steering it forward for years. My mother nodded in agreement. "It's for the best, dear. You need stability. Your father works so hard, and we can't afford to make reckless decisions now." Ethan leaned back, exuding the same overconfidence he always had. "I'll start making changes right away," he said, as if everything had already been decided. "The company needs strong leadership, and I'll have to restructure a few things. Amara, you should think about getting some experience under me first. I can mentor you." He said it with such arrogance that I knew he truly believed it was his birthright. I exhaled slowly and reached into my bag, pulling out a folder of legal documents. I placed them on the table, my fingers tapping lightly against the cover before I slid them toward Ethan. "What's this?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. "Dad's final decision," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I'm the majority shareholder. The company belongs to me." The air in the room shifted instantly. Ethan's confidence faltered, his brows furrowing as he flipped through the documents. My mother gasped, covering her mouth with trembling fingers. "This has to be a mistake," Ethan muttered, his voice tight. He turned to my mother as if she could somehow will a different reality into existence. "Dad wouldn't do this." I leaned back in my chair, watching him unravel. "He saw what I was capable of. While you were busy with your corporate career, I was running the business. He trusted me to continue his work." "You?" Ethan spat the word like it tasted bitter. "You think you can handle an entire company? You don't have the experience, Amara. This is absurd." My mother, still in shock, shook her head. "We need to fix this. There must be something we can do." But there was nothing they could do. My father had made sure of it. Ethan slammed the folder shut and glared at me. "This isn't over." I met his gaze, unwavering. "No, it's not. But the days of you and Mom dismissing me? Those are over." For a moment, no one spoke. My mother still had a look of disbelief on her face. I could see her struggling to process what had just happened, trying to find some way to justify it, to make sense of a world where Ethan wasn't the one in control. Then slowly, the disbelief turned to anger. "This isn't fair," she said, her voice shaking. "Your father must have been confused. He was sick. He wasn't thinking clearly." "He was thinking clearer than ever," I replied. "He saw what I was capable of. He saw that I was already running things while you and Ethan ignored the business." Ethan shook his head. "This is ridiculous. No one is going to take you seriously, Amara. You're not a leader. You don't know how to handle investors. You don't understand corporate finance. I understand it more than you think, I interrupted. I've spent years studying the business, Ethan. I modernized our operations. I built an online system that increased our bookings by 40%. I restructured contracts to save costs. I was the one keeping everything afloat while you were busy padding your resume. His face darkened. He opened his mouth to argue, but I wasn't done. I own the company, I continued. That means I make the decisions now. If you want to be involved, you'll have to work under me. Ethan's expression twisted with fury. You think I'd work for you? He sneered. Over my dead body. I shrugged. Then I suggest you find another job. My mother let out a strangled sound, half gasp, half sob. You can't do this, Amara. This is your family. You're tearing us apart. I met her gaze. No, Mom. You and Ethan did that when you refused to see my worth. Ethan stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back. This isn't over, he growled. I'll fight this. I'll take you to court if I have to. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Good luck with that. Dad made everything legally airtight. But if you want to waste your time and money, be my guest. His fists clenched, but he knew I was right. There was nothing he could do, and that realization only made him angrier. With a furious glare, he stormed out of the room, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. My mother hesitated, looking between me and the doorway where he had just disappeared. I could see the struggle in her eyes, the realization that the son she had placed all her hopes on was no longer in control, and she hated it. Finally, she turned to me, her voice low and cold. You may have won this round, but don't think for a second that this is over. I didn't respond. I just watched as she followed Ethan out of the room, leaving me sitting alone at the head of the table. For the first time, I truly felt the weight of my victory, but I also knew that this was just the beginning. Ethan and my mother weren't going to give up so easily. They would fight me, undermine me, do everything in their power to reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs. But they had underestimated me once before, and I wasn't going to let them do it again. Ethan and my mother were not ones to accept defeat easily. In their eyes, I had stolen what was rightfully his, what had always been meant for the golden child of the family. And if they couldn't get it back through reason, they were more than willing to resort to manipulation, deceit, and sabotage. It started subtly. Ethan began reaching out to investors, painting me as inexperienced and unqualified. He whispered into their ears, calling emergency meetings to discuss the future stability of the company. He positioned himself as the rightful leader, the one who had the business expertise to ensure profitability. He claimed I was impulsive, too emotional, too naive to handle the complexities of running a company at this scale. Simultaneously, my mother worked behind the scenes, rallying the family against me. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly bombarded me with messages, some pleading, some demanding that I reconsider. They repeated my mother's words. How could you do this to your own brother? After all he's done? After all the sacrifices your parents made for you? I had stolen his birthright, they said. I had betrayed the family. But I knew the truth. I had worked for this. I had built this. And I was not about to give it up. Ethan's campaign escalated quickly. He called a board meeting behind my back, hoping to sway our investors against me. I found out just in time and walked into the conference room uninvited, taking my place at the head of the table before he could open his mouth. If anyone here has doubts about my ability to run this company, I said, keeping my voice calm but firm, let's discuss facts, not speculation. I pulled up a presentation on the large screen behind me. Graphs, numbers, and reports flooded the room, showing the undeniable growth the company had experienced under my leadership. Increased revenue, higher occupancy rates, strategic expansions, all backed by hard data. Silence filled the room as investors looked between me and Ethan, who was now visibly uncomfortable. One of them finally spoke up. These numbers are impressive, Amara, he admitted. Far beyond what we expected. Ethan straightened, regaining his smug composure. She may have numbers, but leadership is more than that. You need a strong corporate presence, someone who understands the financial world. I've worked in finance for years. I know how to secure large-scale investments, negotiate deals. That's what we need. I didn't flinch. And yet, while you were busy securing bonuses, I was securing the future of this company. The tension in the room was palpable. Another investor cleared his throat and turned to Ethan. It's clear that Amara knows what she's doing. We have no reason to disrupt a system that's working. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had lost this round. With his plan to manipulate investors failing, Ethan turned to the media. A few days later, an article surfaced online questioning my leadership. Anonymous sources, undoubtedly Ethan and his connections, claimed that I had taken over the business through deception and was driving the company toward disaster. It was a blatant lie, but perception was everything. Investors became wary, employees whispered in break rooms, and clients started asking questions. It was exactly what Ethan wanted. To shake their confidence in me, I fought back with transparency. I called for a public press conference and openly addressed the rumors. I laid out my plans for the company, provided concrete evidence of our success, and answered every question with clarity and composure. And then, I delivered the final blow. I revealed internal reports showing that while Ethan had worked in finance, he had been involved in risky deals that had cost his previous firm millions. The same firm that had let him go under the pretense of restructuring. The media pounced on the revelation. Within hours, the story flipped. Ethan was no longer the wronged heir. He was an opportunist grasping at power he no longer deserved. Realizing his public reputation was tarnished, Ethan and my mother turned to the courts. They tried to challenge my father's will, claiming I had manipulated him in his final days. It was a desperate move, and one that was doomed to fail. The legal documents were airtight. My father's decisions had been made long before his health deteriorated, with clear records proving his full mental capacity at the time. Every attempt they made to contest it was shot down in court. The judge dismissed the case with barely a second thought. And just like that, they had lost again. Ethan's downfall didn't end there. The scandal surrounding his past financial missteps finally caught up with him. His firm had tolerated him when he was an asset, but now he was a liability. He was let go, his reputation in ruins. With no job and no control over the family business, he was forced to downsize, moving into a modest apartment far from the life of luxury he had envisioned for himself. His calls to me became less about rage and more about desperation. Offers to work together, to put the past behind us. I ignored them. My mother, meanwhile, took her own approach to dealing with the loss. She cut herself off from me entirely. Refusing to accept financial help from a disloyal daughter, she moved in with her sister, spending her days lamenting about how I had ruined the family. But I knew the truth. She had simply lost control over a narrative she had spent my entire life reinforcing. And she hated it. Through all of this, I kept going. The company thrived. I expanded our business, securing new partnerships, opening new properties, and strengthening our brand. And with each success, I felt something shift within me. For so long, I had fought for my father's legacy, for my place in a family that had never valued me. But as I sat in my office, overlooking the city skyline, I realized something. This wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right. I had built something greater than they could ever imagine. I had taken my father's dreams and carried them further than even he had envisioned. And I had done it on my own terms. I knew Ethan and my mother would never fully accept this. But that was no longer my concern. The greatest revenge wasn't in destroying them. It was in thriving despite them. And I had won.